Get ready, because today is not meant to feel like an ordinary Monday, and August 17th is not simply another square on the calendar that you move past without a second thought. Something has been building quietly behind the scenes, and by today, the energy surrounding you may become impossible to ignore. Two of the most powerful forces in the sky are moving into a precise relationship. Venus, the planet connected with love, beauty, and abundance, and Jupiter, the planet of expansion and limitless fortune, are forming a rare sextile. Think of this alignment as two enormous currents finally moving in the same direction, creating an opening that can lead toward three very specific doors in your life. These are not meant to be vague spiritual ideas that you can only feel but never recognize. They represent tangible openings, real possibilities, and concrete forms of opportunity that many people spend years hoping will appear. Yet there is an important part of this moment that most people will not understand until it is already passing them by. Around this day, there is also a strange and heavy veil, an unusual emotional atmosphere that can make you want to withdraw, remain still, postpone everything, or question whether taking action is even worth it. You may feel strangely unmotivated precisely when movement matters most. You may tell yourself that you need more time, more certainty, or a clearer sign before doing anything. But if you surrender completely to that frozen feeling, you could walk directly past the very openings this alignment is creating without recognizing them for what they are. That is why you need to understand what has already been happening inside you before you can recognize what today is bringing toward you. The previous week was not ordinary either. The solar eclipse on August 12th cracked something open, and whether you have consciously recognized it or not, you are already moving through a process of rebuilding. The deeper question is not simply what has been falling apart, but what is quietly being constructed in its place. Go back for a moment to what happened around August 12th, because that eclipse is directly connected to what begins unfolding today. The total solar eclipse in Lyon was far more than an impressive celestial display. It represented a profound dismantling of structures that had already become too restrictive for the person you are becoming. Think about the days surrounding it. Something may have shifted in a way that was difficult to explain at first. Perhaps one conversation suddenly carried an emotional weight that seemed far greater than the words themselves. Perhaps you experienced an unexpected realization about a relationship, something you had not been prepared to see but could no longer unsee once it became clear. Or perhaps the change was unmistakable. Something may have ended, a job, a friendship, or even an older version of yourself that you had continued carrying long after it stopped fitting who you were. It is easy in moments like that to label the experience as bad luck, rejection, loss, or punishment. But the deeper meaning presented here is different. The eclipse was clearing space. Eclipses do not merely observe transformation from a distance. They force movement by disrupting what has become stagnant, removing what is blocking the road ahead, whether you feel ready for that removal or not. And because this eclipse occurred in Lyon, the sign associated with identity, creativity, and authentic self-expression, the disruption was never random or superficial. It was aimed directly at the center of your sense of self. It touched the way you see yourself, the way you allow others to see you, the role you have been playing, and the reasons you may have accepted less than what you truly deserve. That is why the emotional impact may have felt so personal. When the foundation of identity is being rearranged, even a small external event can feel enormous internally. You may have felt exposed, emotionally raw, uncertain, or as though the ground beneath you suddenly became unstable. But that sensation does not have to mean that you are failing. It can mean that an old structure is no longer capable of holding the person you are becoming. The eclipse did not simply break something within you. It shattered an outdated mold, creating room for something larger to take shape. And now, that larger possibility is moving closer to today. There was another important development just 2 days ago, on August the 15th, and many people may have overlooked its significance completely. Mercury, the planet associated with communication and ideas, collided with Jupiter in Lion. When the force of thought meets the force of expansion, the mind can suddenly stretch beyond the limits it had accepted before. Ideas can become bigger, bolder, and more ambitious. You may have experienced this personally without immediately knowing why. A sudden flash of clarity may have arrived without warning. An idea may have appeared in your awareness with such completeness that it felt almost as though it had been delivered to you rather than created by you. You may have awakened knowing exactly what needed to be said to someone. You may have suddenly recognized the answer to a problem that had occupied your mind for months. Or perhaps an unexpected conversation appeared at exactly the right moment and planted an idea that you cannot stop returning to. These moments can feel strangely precise because they arrive when you are finally able to see beyond the limitation that previously kept you circling the same problem. Mercury and Jupiter together in Lion carry the atmosphere of the bold statement, the expansive conversation, the declaration that once seemed too large to speak aloud, and the vision that initially feels almost impossible to contain. That is why the idea, the conversation, or the sudden realization that has appeared around you matters so much. It may be connected to the larger sequence already unfolding because what was shaken by the eclipse is now being followed by an expansion of thought. And what has expanded in your mind is preparing you to recognize what comes next. What happens today is not an isolated event, because everything that has been moving through your life is leading directly toward this opening. Think back to the sequence that has already unfolded. The eclipse on August 12th cleared the ground. Mercury and Jupiter on August 15th revealed the plans. And now, August 17th arrives as the moment when the doors of that unfinished construction finally swing open. But there is one condition hidden inside this moment. You have to notice what is being placed in front of you. Today, Monday, August the 17th, Venus at 10 degrees Libra forms an exact sextile with Jupiter at 10 degrees Leo, creating an exceptionally supportive connection between two of the most generous and benevolent planets in the solar system. Venus represents the little fortune, governing love, beauty, money, attraction, and the experiences that make life feel more worthwhile. Jupiter represents the great fortune, the force associated with expansion, blessing, amplification, and multiplication. When these two energies meet through a sextile, opportunity can become much easier to recognize and receive, almost as though something that has been waiting outside suddenly finds a way into your life. Yet there is another reason this alignment carries such weight. Venus is moving through Libra, the sign it rules, and in astrology, a planet in its own sign is traditionally understood to operate with exceptional strength and clarity. There is less restriction around its expression, allowing Venus to embody its own nature with remarkable intensity. Venus in Libra does not need to force attention. Its influence is attractive because it operates through grace, balance, beauty, and presence. Then that Venus reaches toward Jupiter in Leo, a sign connected with the heart, creativity, confidence, and the willingness to stand fully inside your own light without apologizing for it. Air and fire come together here, intellect and warmth, elegance and confidence, and instead of competing, these qualities can strengthen one another. Air feeds fire, fire gives light to air, and together they create an atmosphere in which extraordinary possibilities can begin to feel surprisingly natural. For centuries, astrologers have regarded this kind of alignment as one of the more favorable transits a person can experience, and the interpretation is not limited to some vague promise that everything will suddenly become perfect. Traditional descriptions identify 3 distinct passages associated with this energy, with each one leading toward a different kind of destination. The first passage centers on relationships, and this includes romantic connections, social bonds, professional relationships, and the wider network of people moving through your life. Under this influence, your social magnetism can become especially noticeable. People may respond to you with greater warmth, not simply because you appear attractive or interesting, but because your presence can make them feel acknowledged and valued. Someone may feel unusually comfortable opening up around you. Someone may become more willing to cooperate with you. Someone may offer assistance, encouragement, or something useful without you having to request it first. And this is where the story becomes especially interesting, because ancient astrologers associated this alignment with favors coming from strangers, not necessarily from the people already closest to you. The important person may not be sitting inside your familiar circle at all. It could be someone beside you in a waiting room, someone making an unexpected comment during an ordinary conversation, or an old acquaintance who suddenly reaches out after years of silence. These encounters may appear completely ordinary when they first happen, yet within the symbolism of this alignment, they can carry information, opportunity, or a perspective connected to the chapter ahead. If you have been waiting for a meaningful relationship to enter your life, or hoping for a professional partnership where both sides genuinely feel respected and equal, this is the kind of energy traditionally associated with making that possibility more accessible. But there is something you cannot forget. A sextile creates an opening. It does not force you to walk through it. You still have to participate. You have to appear, respond, accept the invitation, begin the conversation, and remain receptive when someone unexpected crosses your path. The opportunity may be presented, but your choice determines whether it becomes part of your story. Then the second passage begins to reveal itself through finances. But do not misunderstand what this means. This is not necessarily a sudden lottery prize, and it is not a fantasy about money simply dropping from the sky. The financial symbolism here is connected with movement, value, taste, ethics, and the worth created through what you bring into the world. Money can circulate differently when the value you provide becomes recognized, and that is where this second opening begins to take shape, leading naturally into what this alignment may reveal about the way abundance reaches you next. There is a deeper layer to the financial opening arriving with this transit, and if you have spent years questioning your own worth, today may bring that question directly to the surface. Venus governs money, and Jupiter expands whatever Venus touches. So this alignment is not only about what may enter your bank account. It is also about the internal standard you use to decide what you are worth receiving in the first place. Think about the moments when you accepted less than you deserved, charged less than your work was worth, stayed quiet when you should have negotiated, or remained inside financial situations that demanded far more from you than they returned. That pattern of self-valuation is being recalibrated. Ancient texts described this influence as an energy of facilitated paperwork, a period when agreements that once seemed difficult to arrange can suddenly become easier to establish. Contracts that felt impossible to negotiate may begin moving forward. Legal matters that have remained unresolved may finally reach a conclusion. Partnership agreements that offer something meaningful to everyone involved may come together with less resistance than expected. If you have been considering a proposal, a negotiation, or an important financial decision, today carries especially supportive symbolism for taking that matter forward. But there is a detail hidden inside this financial opportunity that is easy to overlook. The abundance associated with this transit is reciprocal. It is not described as an energy that simply rewards hoarding, accumulation, or taking as much as possible for yourself. Instead, it favors generosity and the circulation of value. What happens when you give first, when you share your expertise without immediately demanding payment, when you support another person's vision, or when you choose fairness even though you could easily take more for yourself? These choices matter because they create a pattern of exchange that can return to you in ways you may not anticipate. The financial movement connected with this energy is tied to collaboration, loyalty, mutual respect, and conducting business in a way that reflects who you actually are. If you have spent too long undervaluing yourself, accepting inadequate compensation, or remaining in circumstances that drain more than they provide. This transit becomes a mirror. It shows you the difference between simply wanting more money and finally allowing your compensation to reflect the value you bring. It can also reveal another kind of abundance, the moment when creative work that has been overlooked finally reaches the people capable of appreciating it. That brings us to the third opening, creativity, and this one reaches much deeper than a simple desire to make something beautiful. Leo represents the creator, the performer, the artist, and the individual who brings something into existence that was not there before. Libra represents the aesthete, the force that refines, balances, harmonizes, and recognizes beauty through subtle detail. When Venus in Libra reaches toward Jupiter in Leo, the creative process is not only about producing the work, it is about allowing that work to become visible. Traditional astrological interpretations describe this as the energy of the patron, the moment when an artist does not merely discover an audience, but encounters someone capable of becoming an advocate. That person may possess resources, influence, a platform, or access that allows the creation to travel much farther than the artist could have taken it alone. If you have a project waiting somewhere in the background of your life, perhaps a manuscript, a business idea, or a creative vision that currently feels too ambitious for your present position, today is not symbolically associated with keeping that work hidden. This is an energy connected with presentation, submission, proposal, and the courageous act of allowing someone else to see what you have created. The important psychological shift is that you may have been protecting your work because you were protecting yourself. Keeping the idea private can feel safer than allowing another person to judge it. Delaying the launch can feel safer than discovering that people may not immediately understand it. But the creative passage described here asks you to separate protection from preparation. At some point, the work has to leave the private space where you have been perfecting it and enter the world where it can actually be received. And the recent eclipse makes this especially significant, because the creative identity you carried before has already been stripped down. The older version of you may have created cautiously, sought approval, avoided criticism, or produced things that were acceptable to others instead of things that were completely truthful to you. What remains after that process is more exposed, more honest, and more authentic. That raw version of your creativity is precisely the version this symbolism suggests is ready to be recognized. Yet there is something else surrounding August 17th that could make all of this much harder to act upon than it sounds. Remember the strange veil around this day. Here it is. On the exact day when Venus and Jupiter are opening these three passages, Mars in Cancer forms a tense square with Neptune in Aries, and this changes the way the entire moment needs to be approached. Mars represents drive, ambition, movement, and the force that pushes you toward action. Neptune represents illusion, dissolution, uncertainty, and confusion. When these two forces collide through a square, forward movement can feel strangely difficult, almost like trying to run through water while your body is demanding solid ground. Your energy may feel depleted. Your motivation may disappear without an obvious reason. Your thoughts may become less organized, and the direction that seemed completely obvious only a few days earlier may suddenly appear hidden behind an emotional fog. This is exactly where many people could stumble, because the exhaustion can feel completely convincing. The uncertainty can feel convincing too. You may genuinely believe that nothing is working, that the timing is wrong, or that you should simply stop and wait until everything becomes clearer. You might feel an almost physical heaviness that makes the easiest task seem unnecessarily difficult. And if you obey that feeling without questioning it, you could remain on the couch, cancel your plans, postpone the conversation, hide the project, avoid the negotiation, and allow every opening to close before you ever reach for it. But the presence of the fog beside the presence of fortune is not meaningless within the symbolism of this day. Mars and Neptune are delivering an important lesson about how you move forward. The answer is not to fight harder against the confusion. It is not to force every outcome through sheer determination. It is not to push your way through life with increasingly aggressive ambition. The message is to stop forcing, stop pushing, and stop believing that every door must be opened through pure willpower, because the way through this moment requires a different kind of movement, and that is where the next part begins. Do not make the mistake of believing that today requires you to push harder, because the harder you try to control every outcome, the more easily the energy can slip away from you. The approach that has worked for you in other moments may not work on August 17th. Every battle you attempt to win through sheer force can dissolve into uncertainty, irritation, and exhaustion, leaving you wondering why your usual determination suddenly feels ineffective. But the Venus-Jupiter sextile is offering an entirely different instruction. Instead of chasing everything you want, become available for what is already moving toward you. Instead of fighting for every opening, recognize the openings that are naturally appearing. Instead of trying to force the future into existence, allow yourself to become magnetic enough to receive what is already approaching. That is one of the central lessons of August 17th. The fog surrounding this day is not necessarily there to destroy your momentum. It is there because the old way you operate cannot take you through these new openings. The version of you that grips tightly, demands certainty, forces results, and exhausts itself trying to control every detail, is being confronted with a situation where control is no longer the most effective strategy. That older identity may believe that if you are not constantly pushing, you are falling behind. It may interpret rest as weakness and uncertainty as failure. It may feel uncomfortable receiving something without first proving that you deserve it through struggle. But that is exactly why this moment can feel so unfamiliar. The version of you capable of moving through these openings is different. It moves with greater grace. It trusts the process without becoming passive. It remains present without demanding immediate certainty. It shows up with an open heart and allows the universe to meet it halfway. These are the qualities this moment is asking you to practice. So if you wake up today feeling unusually tired, mentally scattered, emotionally heavy, or strangely disconnected from your normal motivation, do not immediately assume that something has gone wrong. Do not look at the lack of energy and conclude that the opportunity is not real. Something significant can still be unfolding while your nervous system is asking you to slow down and change the way you respond. The challenge is not necessarily to stop moving. The challenge is to stop moving from fear and compulsion. You are being asked to navigate differently from the habits that brought you to this point. And there is another reason. Your choices today matter so much, because the story does not end when the 3 doors open. 4 days after the Venus-Jupiter sextile, on August 21st, Venus moves into a direct opposition with Saturn, and that is when the atmosphere changes. Saturn is not particularly interested in how exciting something felt at the beginning. Saturn is concerned with structure, responsibility, commitment, durability, and whether the choices you made on August 17th have enough substance underneath them to survive reality. This is where the emotional excitement of the opening meets the weight of consequence. Imagine a relationship that suddenly feels magnetic and unusually easy. Saturn asks whether that connection is actually built on truth, maturity, and genuine compatibility, or whether you are simply responding to chemistry and temporary excitement. Imagine a contract that looked incredibly promising when it first appeared. Saturn asks whether you carefully examined the details and understood what you were agreeing to. Imagine a creative opportunity arriving so suddenly that you feel almost carried away by the possibility. Saturn asks whether you are truly prepared to do the less glamorous work required to turn that possibility into something real. This is why your behavior on August 17th carries more importance than the excitement of the moment itself. If you use that energy with integrity, remain honest about what you can offer. Avoid making promises you cannot keep, and stay faithful to your genuine values. Then August 21st can represent the point where an exciting beginning gains real structure. What first looked like a promising handshake can begin becoming a formal and durable agreement. A beautiful beginning can receive the foundation necessary to continue. But Saturn has another side. If you become carried away by the excitement and agree to things you do not truly want, if you overpromise because you are afraid the opportunity will disappear, or if you accept commitments that conflict with your deeper values, Saturn will expose the imbalance. Reality eventually sends the bill for decisions made without sufficient awareness. Saturn does not punish you because you were hopeful. It tests whether your hope has something strong enough underneath it to stand on. That is why the way you walk through these openings today matters so much. The doors may genuinely be open, and the opportunity may genuinely exist. But what you choose once you cross the threshold can influence consequences that extend far beyond this particular week. There is also a much larger picture that you cannot afford to overlook. Many people may look at the Venus-Jupiter sextile and assume it is simply one fortunate day that arrives, creates a few pleasant possibilities, and disappears. But within this interpretation, it is part of a much larger story. Because of the upcoming Venus retrograde cycle, Venus will spend an unusually long period moving through Libra, including moving backward through the sign and then passing through it again. That extended process means the relationship developments, financial recalibrations, and creative openings that begin around August 17th are not necessarily brief sparks that disappear as quickly as they arrive. They can become seeds planted at the beginning of a story that continues developing across the next 4 months. What begins today, if you recognize it and work with it consciously, could influence the direction of the rest of your year. Then, on August the 31st, another important development brings additional weight to the larger sequence. Jupiter forms a perfect trine with Saturn, the first in a series that will not conclude until the middle of 2027. This is the symbolism of the practical visionary, the person who can dream expansively while still understanding how to build, the optimist, who knows that inspiration becomes powerful when it is supported by a plan, and the individual who does not merely capture a flash of possibility, but creates the structure required to preserve it. The events of this week can be understood as leading toward that larger meeting between opportunity and structure. The confusion, the fortune, the openings, and the tests all become part of the same progression. The real achievement is not simply experiencing good fortune. It is learning how to turn good fortune into something lasting. It is the moment when what looked like luck becomes something you can build upon and eventually leave behind as an inheritance of choices, work, and integrity. This is also why the timing feels urgent. The Venus-Jupiter sextile has a specific peak, and once that peak passes, the exact window changes. The opening is meaningful, but it is not permanent. Many people may sense today that the atmosphere feels different. They may notice that conversations seem easier, possibilities feel slightly closer, or something inside them quietly suggests that they should take a step they have been postponing. Yet sensing a change is not the same as responding to it. Some people will wait for absolute certainty. Others will convince themselves that the timing is not right. Some will allow the heaviness of the Mars-Neptune square to become the final decision for them. They will postpone the invitation, delay the proposal, hide the creative work, avoid the conversation, or simply remain where they are because uncertainty feels safer than movement. Then the energy will shift, and they may still be standing in the same place wondering why nothing changed. But you are hearing this before that moment arrives. You understand what the August 12th eclipse cleared away. You understand what Mercury and Jupiter revealed on August the 15th. You understand the 3 openings associated with Venus and Jupiter. And you understand that the fog surrounding August 17th does not necessarily exist to stop you. It can serve as a signal that your old method of moving through life is no longer the method required for what comes next. And after everything that has happened, there is only one question left. Will you step forward when the opportunity appears? The doors are open. The path has become visible. Every disruption, every uncomfortable shift, every strange emotional sensation, and every sudden moment of clarity has brought you toward this point. The eclipse, the revelation from Mercury and Jupiter, the three openings of Venus and Jupiter, the confusion created by Mars and Neptune, and the tests that follow are all pieces of the same unfolding sequence. Today is not simply about receiving something new. It is about meeting a new version of yourself at the threshold. The person you were before August 17th does not have to respond to life in the same way anymore. The person emerging after it can move with greater trust, greater discernment, and greater willingness to recognize what is already reaching toward them. The world before August 17th and the world after it may not feel identical, and neither will you. If you have stayed with this message until now, thank you for giving it your attention. If this reflection resonated with you and you want to continue exploring these moments of astrological and spiritual insight, consider subscribing for more. Your support is genuinely appreciated. And if you have already noticed something shifting in your own life, share your experience or your reflection in the comments, because sometimes the clearest confirmation comes from recognizing that someone else has felt the same unusual change. Take care of yourself. Stay aware of what is opening around you, and remember that the next step does not always require force. Sometimes it begins with recognizing the door that is already open.